All right, it's Pipes Drums, and we're here on February 26th, 2022, and we're just absolutely thrilled to have three of the great leaders, the greatest leaders of all time in pipe band history, from Canada, history-making people, Ken Eller from Fonthill, Ontario, Hal Seneck from New Westminster, British Columbia, and Jamie Troy from Victoria, British Columbia. And thanks, guys, for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And, you know, yeah, I mean, each of you has led, some world-beating bands in their day, and history-making bands. You know, Ken Eller, Clan McFarlane, Hal Seneck, Triumph Street, and Jamie Troy, City of Victoria, bands that were kind of breakthrough bands, really set the scene for what is happening today, set things up largely for overseas bands, non-UK bands, did some great things and really turned heads in the 1970s. So we thought we'd get you guys together and talk about some of those times, and so that we can enlighten some viewers and talk about the past and the present. So Kenny, why don't we start with you? You know, looking back, what did you think of one another's bands?
Well, we go back. You must realize that prior to 1972, we didn't have the communications that we have today. We didn't have the flight patterns and what we had today. And so I think Archie Cairns's event in Ottawa, which brought the Canadian bands together, and I think it was around Canada Day in 1972. We weren't competitors prior to that. We hardly were even friends, to be honest with you, because communication just wasn't there. And then we all landed in the same city, same weekend, and things just started to bubble over. And I think from my recollection, and it still is vivid today, is that it was instant friendship. There was no really rivalry, because we didn't know the rivals at the time. And the only communication we had was sort of things like the BC Pipers newsletter, or the, shall we say, the Piper and Dancer bulletin at that time that listed results. So we knew that the City of Victoria and Triumph Street were good bands. And from our perspective, they were relatively new on the scene. Our band had been going since '57. So we were established in grade one. We'd already been to Scotland once. So really, we didn't know what to expect, yet it was sort of a great chance to meet our competitors from the West, which became great friends and so on. So it was, and the respect instantly from the results, I think, lasted with each one of us. We found out that each band was really good in its own right, and that sticks with me today as well. So that's how I saw the bands, and they developed over the '70s and into the '80s and remained there, you know.
So Hal and Jamie, you're of course in British Columbia, so you would have been competing against one another all the time, Triumph Street and City of Victoria, whereas Ken would be Clan McFarlane in Ontario. Did you two have a serious kind of rivalry? How did you get on? What did you think of one another's bands?
Yeah, killed each other until the beer tent. Yeah, that's it. It was, of course, we wanted to win, and the only other person around was Triumph Street for us. So that's what we did. You know, we didn't work to win. We worked to play as good as we could, but it was always, we gotta, we're up against Triumph Street again. So we'll put her down again. But before this, I wanted to say that when we went back east, I guess when they were bringing the European bands out, we were on the CFV was on a tour back east. We hit 2 or 3 games, and I don't know if Maxwell was part of that. I can't remember, but I can remember us had played or getting ready, and I told the band, get out to the road. I want you to listen to Clan McFarlane as they come through. And so I just pointed out that that's what we want to listen. That's what you want to sound like as you were playing, you were getting ready to play somewhere into the circle. because you were just keeping your tone playing down the street, so, but I can remember that, just telling everybody, that's what we're after, to all those young kids that I had at the time.
And
So-
Hal, yeah, Triumph Street would have come to the Intercontinental Championships,
Yeah.
from time to time.
Our first trip was, I believe, in '74. We went back, I think it was in Ottawa. And at that time, we were still a young band. We'd only been going for a couple of years, and we weren't even sure if we were a grade 1 band. Like, we're swimming, had no idea really what was going on, except for our contacts, butting heads with City Victoria. And I remember vividly, just to echo what Jim said, we went around to listen to the Clan McFarlane tuning up, took the kids over there, and it scared the hell out of them. They said, holy mackerel, how could we ever do that? And I said, well, let's go around the back of the barn and roll our sleeves up and see what we can do. I think we actually got a second that day in one of the contests, just behind the Clan. So that was a real confidence builder for our band, to realize that, we're grade 1. We can do this. So that, to me, that was a real seminal time for getting launched.
Hal, sorry, Jamie, Hal, on that account, we did the same for you guys. Our guys we wanted to know what the bands from the West were really like. And up until that point, we had no communication. So our guys were, they heard you compete. They heard you especially march off. We were playing off at that time, and it was wow. And we knew then that in Canada, it wasn't all Ontario. Let's put it that way. And so it's a big thank you, maybe 50 years later, but you guys really got things going for the country. I'll tell you that.
That's great. Yeah. And, at the time, I know that we've talked about 1979 in the past, that year at the Worlds, where both Triumph Street was 5th and City of Victoria was 6th, and Triumph Street won the drumming, et cetera. But, but the 70s in general, were the three of you conscious of like making history as kind of North American bands and ready to break through and, challenging at the very top, not just being grade 1, but actually having a serious shot at being world champions? Were you conscious of that kind of turning point that it turned out to be? Hal, maybe start with you.
Yeah, I don't think we consciously were looking to be groundbreakers or anything like that. We just wanted to be good, and we wanted to be recognized as a good band. To be honest with you, our first trip overseas was '76, and we were, we'd proven ourselves in North America that we can hold our own, basically. And we wanted to be able to hold our own against some of the Scottish bands. That was our very first trip over. And we actually did pick up a 4th at the Europeans that year. That's actually one of the biggest prizes I can ever remember winning, because it was our first time over there. They didn't know us, and they were going to give us a prize. So I was really happy with that one.
Quite something at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jamie, were you, but what about history and, conscious of that, or just kind of like Hal and just trying to do the best you could?
Well, Hal and I were the only ones that had experienced kind of a grade 1-ish sound when Hardy took all the instructors down at Coeur d'Alene, and we made a pipe corps out of it. And he didn't do anything or say anything, but all of a sudden we had this sound that was incredible, that was coming out of all these people, all the junior instructors at Coeur d'Alene. So that's where we got the the feel of the whole thing. Then we had to transfer that over to all the people who didn't know what we were doing really, because we were just building day by day and working as hard as we could. So, we had, this is part of another thing, but we had our vision of what we wanted to be, and we worked at that. So,
yeah.
And we weren't conscious of being world beaters or or laying down any history pattern at all. It's just that we wanted to do this and we wanted to take it as far as we could.
And Ken Eller, does that jibe with sort of Clan McFarlane's attitude at the time?
Oh, I think it does. I think history's never made in the present, so you don't go out with the idea of making history. You know, I think history is written long after the fact in the results that come out and longevity of the band, leadership, the sound, all those qualities that you imagine that the band you used to have, you see. And so it's not made on the day, and you're just trying to always play to your best. And if you can do that, you're satisfied with your performance. And I never thought of the three of us until some years later. And then I said, oh, that was quite something, because that was really bringing the whole country together. So long after the fact, I think, Andrew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. We kind of talked about at the outset about what you thought of each other's bands. What about interpersonal relationships? Hal and Jamie, seeing each other every weekend. Was there kind of like enemies? It seems like bands today, they all love each other. Everybody gets along.
Yeah.
It seemed maybe back then, and because there was no internet and social media, perhaps, were you kind of like, that is the enemy over there?
I'll pick up on this one for a couple of minutes, Jamie, and then you can fill in the blanks. I actually grew up in Victoria, piping wise, okay, through my teenage years. So Jim became kind of almost like a big brother to me in my piping development. I spent countless hours in Jim's living room, playing, recording, getting feedback, giving each other hell about what we're doing wrong, and just night after night after night, I'd be over at his house playing. So I owe Jim a huge debt for really getting me inspired and launched, but and then off to have a beer and that afterwards. Yeah.
Of course, we're always been good friends.
Yeah.
Really. It's never, the band was the rivalry, but the band's the band. But Hal and I have been friends since you were here in Victoria. That's when it started. Yeah.
Yeah. What about that? Sorry. What about it at the Worlds in Nottingham in '79, where you were resentful of, there was, Victoria, we got tipped by Triumph Street sort of thing. Or was it just, we're all in it together?
Well, got mixed feelings about that because, we knew we played okay. And we knew we had the park in the warm-up area because we'd fire up, it'd be a huge crowd. And I would just cut it off, wait till the sound started to stabilize and shut her down. Everybody disappeared. And then a little while, I was just trying to maintain the tone to get on the park and get off without blowing it up. So and I'd fire it up again. Huge crowd would come around. But in the beer tent after we played, I was just having a beer with all the top guys at the time, just talking, and they were telling me how amazed they were at the sound of the band. Didn't like the result very much. So, but that was the highlight of that.
Yeah.
79 Worlds was talking to Ian and Tom, Bob, Ian McLeod from Edinburgh, and just bantering back and forth and saying how much they liked the band. That was good enough for me. So
yeah, one of those performances where people talked about it afterwards and kind of contended that Victoria should have maybe won that day. And I'm sure they said that about Triumph Street as well.
Well, Willie Score won, but
yep.
I can remember the criteria for drum corps back then were there was Duthard, and then everybody else trying not to be Duthard.
Yeah.
You know, Turner one of them. You know, he added 2 strokes to everything, whatever it be, made a 9 out of a 7, or you know what I mean. You know, add fill things up and not play like Duthard. And of course, Bob adamantly wanted Turner to play in 4/4 time rather than 12/8, which Duthard was doing in Strathbase. You know.
Interesting. Yeah, you're talking
Yeah.
about Bob Hardy and Rab Turner from
Yeah,
Muirhead and Sons. Yeah. And Kenny, you know, that kind of, you know, it seems like you touched on that and everyone was friends before. You know, did you notice any, you know, in Ontario, the kind of tense rivalry that was happening in grade 1 maybe at the time was quite different from what was happening in British Columbia?
Well, you know, first of all, with Hal and Jamie, to give you an example, I don't think we looked at each other as being competitors, definitely not off the field. And around 1980 or so, I had the opportunity through the BC Pipers to go to Vancouver for an extended period. And who's the first to reach out to me? Hal Senek. And I stayed it was more than days, it was weeks then, and I was toured around Vancouver. I mean, this is acts of friendship. And then Hal said, well, we got to go over to Victoria and see Jamie.
Yeah.
And the Vancouver Island Pipers Club as well, which we did. And I can remember going over to see Jamie at that time, and we went to the club that night, but then we came back, and I think we woke up in sometime midday the next day, because we went most of the night in his sound room, and so on. So that is sort of a witness to our friendship over the years. We met again many times since then, but take Glasgow in 2019, right out of the box. We got to see each other. We got to talk. We got to catch up. So there wasn't that. Now, Ontario was in the 70s was much the same. We had bands like the City of Toronto, Chris Anderson, and so on. Best of friends. In fact, I would say Chris gave me the biggest plug I could ever have after placing last in my first contest with the Clan. He says, don't worry about it. I see you've got potential. He says, just keep at it. And he was correct. So it wasn't that. And so we didn't develop any rivalry outside of the contest arena at all. And the beer tent, and even going to parties with other bands. For example, when St. Thomas Legion had their 75th anniversary, a few of us went up to it to help celebrate with them. So it was much the same as what Hal and Jamie are saying. Maybe a little different climate than what it is today, okay?
Yeah, well, you know, despite my comment earlier about everyone being friends today, you know, I think you'd be hard pressed to see people, you know, spending 2 weeks at one another's house and, you know, camping and things like that, that used to take place in a slower sort of time when everyone wasn't always rushing around and multitasking and everything else with technology. It was a
That's
different
correct.
time in friendships. So why don't we wrap up this part now, and we'll take a look at some things, you know, bands you tried to emulate and things like that in part 2. So stay tuned.
Sounds good.